Who can come to follow Rav Nata? So like Zuten Stark. The subject that I want to touch on in the time that we have is certain political movements, particularly in the United States, which people are struggling with, both practically in the challenges they face in their daily lives, families, institutions, and theoretically how to understand, how to integrate what we see. I'd like to start with a few basic Torah propositions, which I will lean on in order to make comments about these political phenomena. First of all, the Maharal says that one of the purposes of being in exile is to learn from what you see what you are not. To learn to see how other people, and as Nata said, civilized in scare quotes, so-called civilized behavior other people engage in order to define yourself by distinction, by differentiation. And the point really goes further than that. It's not only to perceive that I'm different, and not only to make sure that I'm different, but one has to appreciate that it is impossible to build hermetically sealed walls. There is no way to prevent the influence of the society, the larger society, the larger environment from impinging upon us. We have to also be self-conscious. Where am I being touched by this external reality? Where is it diluting my own self-perception, my own self-direction? Where is it causing me to misunderstand even the Torah that I live by, the Torah that I study? One of the Tversky brothers said, if you think you can build a wall that seals out the external influences, then you're lost, because it won't work, and you won't be on guard to see where you have actually been affected, and then take steps. Now, a second Torah principle we learn from Megillas Esther. When Mordechai goes wailing through the streets, and Esther has no idea why, she sends her trusted servant Hasach with a request to Mordechai. She says, tell me, Mazeh v'al mazeh. Two separate questions. One way to distinguish the questions is this. Mazeh, what's going on? Who is the enemy? What kind of forces does he have? What kind of weaknesses does he have? Who are our allies? What resources do we have to respond, to undo? What is the situation on the ground, the factual situation on the ground? The al-mazeh, what does the divine providence want from us in this circumstance? And both questions are necessary. Because obviously, from our point of view, you could study the politics and the economics and the sociology and the military science. If you have no clue as to how HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, then you're missing it. But likewise, even if you study what the Torah has to tell you, you may not know how to apply it to this concrete situation if you don't know what the concrete situation is. For a simple example, suppose the threat is a threat of economic devastation. Then it would be reasonable to say we have to improve the way we use our resources, the way we use our money, our wealth. Whereas if the threat is existential, so the threat of annihilation, then our whole lives are in question. That requires a different orientation as to how we should deal with the threat. So we need to know both what the principles of divine providence are on the one hand, and what the concrete situation on the other hand is built out of. And finally, we have to distinguish, Rav Nota just said this, we have to distinguish between asking why, in the sense of what does the Kodesh Baruch Hu have in mind, which is obviously out of line. Without prophecy, without a Kodesh Baruch Hu revealing to us through prophecy, we have no right to say what a Kodesh Baruch Hu has in mind. I saw, with respect to the Meron tragedy, a headline in our press here in Israel of Chaim Kanievsky explains why it happens. I thought, what? Chaim Kanievsky? Yeah, but the article said the opposite. The article said his grandson asked him why it happened, and Rav Chaim said, Cheshbon Shamayim. We have no business with Cheshbon Shamayim. So we're not going there. But we can ask, what can we learn to fix? That's up to us to analyze what happened and look at it, our own behavior in the light of what happened, and then ask ourselves, what can we fix? That definitely is a Kodesh Baruch Hu's purpose. The purpose of things like that, especially tragedies, is for us to use it as an inspiration to improve. The Rambam says as much in Hilchos Tainis. He says someone who refuses to take the lesson from the event and improve is cruel, because that's the only solution. So I'd like to look at the contemporary political scene with two lenses. And again, this is very superficial. The situation is extremely complex, as you understand. But my focus is to see what we can learn from it, what we can do for ourselves to try to understand where we might have a shortcoming and be able to improve our own lives as Jews, and perhaps thereby Kodesh Baruch Hu will have rachamim on us. After all, Baal Shem Tov taught us that when you see something, you have to ask, why did the Kodesh Baruch Hu show this to me? What am I supposed to do about it? Not what does he have in mind, Chas v'sholom, but it's a signal to me that I should do something. Baal Shem Tov once saw Chilul Shabbos, gross Chilul Shabbos in front of him, and it took him time to think, why did I see Chilul Shabbos? And he remembered an occasion on which a Talmud Chacham was being insulted in public, and the Baal Shem Tov remembered that the Baal Shem Tov, didn't take enough energy to defend him in the appropriate way, and the Gemara calls a Talmud Chacham Shabbos, so he realized that he had to do tshuva for that failure to protect the Talmud Chacham. So we too have to look at what we see and learn from it. Now, one of the elements that we see growing in today's society is rampant, wild violence, whether it is random attacks on police officers or random destruction of businesses or the creation of politically empty spaces, like in Portland, where no governmental authority can dare set its foot, where violent attack on those with whom you disagree is appropriate, reinforced, congratulated. What significance does this have in a large sense? In a large sense for the community as a whole, for the polity as a whole, for the country. There was a celebrated political philosopher in the middle of the 20th century, middle to late century, named John Rawls, professor at Harvard. He wrote a number of very fundamental works. And he made an observation, which I think is absolutely crucial, not only for the United States, but really for any country, any national or even local tzibur, political organization. You want people to work together. You want people to cooperate. That can only happen in an atmosphere of mutual respect, mutual accommodation. And mutual accommodation works like this. People have values. Some values are higher than other values. You have priorities. Your life, your safety, and your health are more important than next summer's vacation. The propriety of keeping your promises and telling you the truth is more important than saying hello to someone on the street. There are levels in priorities. Now, when you have different groups of people with different orientations, different religions, different ideologies, different pictures of the world, different projects, how are you going to get them to cooperate with one another? How are you going to get them to integrate into a single cooperative society? The answer is that in addition to all the ideas, all the values, all the principles that divide them, all the ones that are individual to each person in each group, there has to be a shared, common, supreme principle. And the supreme principle is, the most important thing is to live together cooperatively. That's more important than my belief in what the top value of government is, or my belief in what charity should be, or my belief in the way society should be organized. More important is that the different groups should be able to cooperate with one another. If that's at the top of each group's values, then you have good hope that they'll be able to cooperate with one another, because the lower values, when they get in the way, when they start to disturb that integration, are going to be subordinate. But if you don't have that, if the values that you hold that separate you from others, the values that you hold with which you attack and condemn others are more important than the commitment to live together, then the result is the breakdown of society. Now, what you see from certain people, certain groups, I don't have to tell you the names, you know them yourselves, is this abandonment of mutual respect, the abandonment of accommodation, the abandonment of the commitment to integrate their efforts together, and rather the waving of the flag of fanaticism. I'm right, only I am right, everyone else is wrong, and if you don't get on board with me, then you have to be destroyed. This is a fundamental threat to the survival of the country as a country. I remember watching the Senate confirmations for Justice Barrett. She was being questioned by Cory Booker, who was a senator from New Jersey. He was saying, you may be on the Supreme Court. Do you realize how much Blacks have suffered in America? I've written this and this and this book about Black suffering. What are you going to do on the Supreme Court to help promote the position of Blacks in this society? She said, as a Supreme Court justice, I'm going to interpret the Constitution. And I'm going to give legal rulings on the basis of the way in which I understand the Constitution. Do you hear the mismatch here? For Cory Booker, you're a Supreme Court judge, you have power. You have power, use it. Constitution or no constitution. Laws or no laws. Use your power to make the world over in the image that you believe in. That's the philosophy of a certain political group. Raw power. The principles of government, the principles of law, are the things that we all share, supposedly, and they're the ones that preach cooperation and mutual respect. She said, you want to repair the disadvantages of Blacks in the country, you do that. You're in the legislature, make laws that will do that. It's not my job to do that as a justice. His attitude was, you have power, use it. You have a hammer, smash something. You have a gun, shoot somebody. Use your power as power. That's a message which ultimately divides society into warring groups. The hope to remain an integrated society is with a respect for a common framework, where the common framework preaches mutual respect. Now, as I said a few minutes ago, we all were shocked. We all mourned the destruction in Meron. I live in Har Nof. 2 people of Har Nof were killed there. Right across the street, family lost a child. And we're not out to read the Hashgacha Elyona, but we could learn a lesson from what happened to meditate on our own condition and see what we could improve. This idea that I'm going to tell you now was mentioned by many. I heard it from the Savrana Rebbe of Harnov. He wrote it in a letter which he circulated. You have a situation where Jews die where no one is at fault. No one is at fault. It was a pure accident. And Jews die because other Jews trampled them to death. Jews trampling Jews. Jews crushing Jews. All religious Jews. From every different background. From every different Eidah. Trampling us ourselves. Well, widen the lens a little bit and turn it inward. How do we live our Jewish life? I'm talking about the religious Jewish population. How do we live our Jewish life? Is it possible that we are divided into different groups? Is it possible that each person waves the flag of his group and says, I'm right? And because I'm right, you have to be wrong? Is it possible that we tear down other people's reputations, that we cast aspersions on other people's values, that we don't trust them as being loyal to the Torah? The Torah? Which Torah? My Torah. They're not loyal to my Torah. They're loyal to my perception of Torah. Then they're out. They're outside the circle. Now, I'm not saying it's as extreme, obviously, as what's going on in the Goyish world, but maybe we suffer from it too much. Maybe we don't have enough respect for one another. V'ahavta recha kamocha does not mean your identical twin. A Reya is not an identical twin. A Reya is a friend. Love has to go beyond just identical twins. But I'm telling you now, everyone knows, but like the Mesilas Yesharim says in the Hagdama, some things have to be said over and over again until they get integrated, until it becomes something which burns inside you. 12 tribes. Yisachar and Zvulun. What about a girl who can't get into a school because her father works? He works. You hear the word works? He works. What a tragedy. The father's working to support his family. She can't go to this school. No, she's not allowed. She's second class, third class. She's off the map. Doesn't get a class, not even 10th. In our last period of history, because Baruch Hashem, the population is growing, and there are differences of opinion, things split. Yeshivas split, Hasidism split, communities split, shul split. I heard in the name of the Chazon Ish a very, to me, fascinating observation. If I dare say it, it's a very Hasidic observation. He said, everything has a source in Kedusha. Even if it's misused, it has a source in Kedusha. Someone is doing Mesiras Nefesh for Torah. What Torah? Well, the Torah he was trained in, the Torah he identifies with, Torah of his group, Mesiras Nefesh. Now, what do you need to build up your motivation to be Moser Nefesh for Torah? Well, one thing that helps is feeling I'm right. I'm fighting for the right, the true, the good. And I need that. Because if I don't have that, then I won't have the motion to make the motivation to make the sacrifices that are necessary to do it with Mesiras Nefesh. Now you come along and tell me I'm making a mistake. I can't hear that because I'm not making a mistake. Why am I staying up till 2 o'clock in the morning? Why am I spending all my money? Why am I not doing things which my own learning, let's say, rather than teaching Torah? Why am I doing that? The Chatzar Devracha said once that he could have written Sfarim that would turn the world upside down. His skoral was to make the yeshiva in America. He didn't say it with regret because that's what Hashgacha wanted from him. He saw that. He built America with that yeshiva. So if we don't understand that Klal Yisrael is made up of different groups, different philosophies, different structures, different strategies, if we don't recognize that every strategy has ups and downs, it has positives and negatives. No one's life is perfect, no one's strategy is perfect, and Klal Yisrael needs all of them. Sometimes Klal Yisrael needs some extremists in order to keep the rest of us from falling off the cliff. Someone asked Rav Aaron Gottlieb, he visited the yeshiva, he came to Shachris, half the boys were not in Shachris. He said, Hayatochen, this is the yeshiva of America? They don't come to Shachris? What is this? Rav Aaron said, you have to understand. Imagine a bacher, he's taking a shower at 1:30 in the morning, 1:45, he's walking into his room. From down the hall, another bacher says, what about the Rebbe Kiveger? The next thing they know, it's 4:30 in the morning. They fall into bed. You want him to be up for Shachris? There has to be someplace where learning is it. Yes, if you're asleep at Shachris under those conditions, you're honest, and you're honest Rahman Patre. I'm not talking about the halachas now. But not every place has to be like that. But someplace has to be like that. So Klal Yisrael needs that variety so that everybody can benefit from the few extremists. The Kutzker in his passion for emes was an extremist. It wasn't the idea that everybody should be a Kutzker. But without Kutzk, the rest of us are going to fall into the pit of sloppiness in the emes and sheker. This appreciation and understanding that we can be affected by this extremism, as someone said, one of the most enjoyable experiences, one of the most enjoyable emotions in life is righteous indignation. Boy, are they wrong. Boy, are they terrible. And that means I'm so good. I'm so right. I'm so pure. Can you hear the Satan talking? Can you hear the Yetzer Hara talking? I can hear it very clearly when you say it. It's much harder to hear it when I say it because I'm right. That's what's going on. So after Rabbi wrote this letter, he said, I know I'm going to fail with this letter because each person reading the letter is going to say, what a wonderful letter. I hope he'll read it. But he won't say, maybe he's talking to me also. Maybe I have to think again. That's one observation I think we can take from what's going on and perhaps learn for ourselves something that needs to be done. There's a second. The last 40 years, it's become very, very popular to talk about empowerment, empowering people. I think we have here a slippery slope, a slippery word, because on the one hand, starting out, empowerment, I think, connoted a very valuable, positive concept, and it has slipped over into an extremely destructive, negative concept. Empowerment started out meaning you have something that's important for you to do, that's right, that's good, that's necessary, that's constructive for you to do, and you don't have the means to do it. You don't have the money to do it. You don't have the courage to do it. You don't have the help and allies to do it. We're going to get you that ability. We're going to empower you to do this important thing that you need to do. Of course, power can be used for good or for ill, but the idea was the project is already on the table and you need more resources of one kind or another, including instruction, to be able to carry out the project. That can be a very positive idea. But it has come to mean something else. It has come to mean that in deciding what I should do with my life, I am the top authority. No one can tell me what to do. No one tell me what I ought to do. No one can tell me what it's right to do. I decide that for myself. No one else is relevant. This is not ability. This is authority. I and only I have the authority to decide for myself what I should do. Inconsistently, for these people, logical consistency is not a high priority. Not only will he decide what he should do for his life, but he'll also decide what you should do for your life. And no one can tell him that he's wrong. This gives him more than just ability. It gives him authority. And then nothing can stand in his way. But you see, this is just foolish. It's foolish. Very often, one person can look at another and say, he's dedicated himself to X. It's a disaster. X may be impossible. And the poor fellow just doesn't know that it's impossible. So he's wasting his time. X may have consequences that he doesn't even dream of. And he knows that it's going to be so destructive, so that if would he know these consequences, he wouldn't have done it. And he just doesn't know it. And were a person a little more self-reflective, he could think to himself, I'm 26 and I'm committed to X. What was I committed to when I was 15? Oh, 15? When I was a kid? Then I wanted to be president. By the time I was 18, I outgrew it. Right. And what were you committed to when you're 18? Making my million by 25. Right. And what were you committed to at 21? Oh, setting up a political movement to accomplish XYZ. And at 24, oh, then I was going to discover a medicine that would help cure a certain disease. Well, what happened? You changed your mind 3 times? 4 times? Didn't that convince you that maybe even now you're going to change your mind again in the future? That this commitment, this project, which right now you're ready to go and throw Molotov cocktails at your enemies, 5 years from now, you may not believe in it anymore. What about a little self-reflection, a little self-doubt? You aren't the top authority for deciding what you ought to do. Other people could know better than you what you ought to be doing, or certainly what you ought not to be doing. So slipping from ability to authority is a terrible, terrible slip. And this is, in fact, what we are dealing with. Now, I tried to check the source of the story. Everybody knows the story. Someone told me it was the Divrei Chaim of Tzanz. Someone else told me it was the Chafetz Chaim, where he said, when I was a young man, I thought I'm going to change the world. I got older and I thought to myself, I'll change my city. I got older, I thought to myself, maybe I should just change myself, or at least start with changing myself. That's very profound. And here's why it's profound. I think this is part of the underlying reason for this slide from ability to authority and the appeal of the whole idea of empowerment. Because young people somewhere in their consciousness realize they have no power. They really have no power. They can't hold a job. They couldn't support themselves. They can't build a building. They can't program a computer. They're what? They're in college? Sophomores? Juniors? What can they do? No one will pay them to do anything. They can't do anything useful. They really have no power. So along comes a false ideology that says, you have power. We'll show you how to have power. Break windows. Throw stones at the police. Send threatening emails and other social media to people so you can frighten them. You have the power to destroy. That power you have. That's true, but how sad it is. You build your life around destroying, because that's juvenile power. The person wants to feel that he's contributing something. The person wants to feel that he makes a mark in the world, that the world's a different place because he was in it. But learning how to build, that takes years and years. Learning how to build means learning how to have allies. Learning how to build means learning how to show and receive mutual respect, to cooperate. You don't build things on your own. So this is poison. Now, what this Gottlieb said, whichever one it was, he was giving expression to that high aspiration. I want to make the world a better place. That's a wonderful aspiration. But how practical is it? Starting out, let's say he's a 22-year-old bacher in yeshiva. It's going to change the world? Okay, maybe the city. Really? The whole city is going to listen to you? Why should they listen to you? You're 22 years old. What have you done? What have you accomplished? He said, I'm going to change myself. So first of all, if you change yourself, that's a realistic goal. Number two, if it is, you'll learn something. You learn something about the effort. You learn something about the obstacles. You learn something about your strengths and weaknesses. Not only that, but if you succeed to some good extent in changing yourself and building yourself, people will respect you. That will put you in a position where you could exercise some leadership. So it's a bridge to affecting larger parts of society. But this is what it takes to do something constructively rather than destructively. Kodesh Baruch Hu set up the world where there are choices of different things roughly on the same level, one good and one bad. That's in order to have free will. It has been said that both Nevuah and the Yeshivat Ohr Somayach left the world at the same time, the beginning of Vayesheni. Why did they leave the world at the same time? Because it's Zelu Mazeh. Nevuah means absolute attachment, dveikus, and hachnoah to Kodesh Baruch Hu. Moshe Rabbeinu was the highest Navi because there was nothing left. He was Shechina Medaberes Mitoch Grono. Kodesh Baruch Hu spoke through his throat. He was Mevatel himself to Kodesh Baruch Hu entirely. That's getting beyond yourself. But it's getting beyond yourself by absolute isbatlus to Kodesh Baruch Hu. Avodah Zorah is cheap transcendence. Cheap, phony transcendence. There's a getchka, and you bow to it, and you praise it as if it has higher powers, but going through the Mesilas Yesharim and living every chapter isn't part of the entrance exam. The entrance exam is enthusiasm and an ability for violence. So that's the destructive side of self-transcendence, and the Nevuah is the positive side of self-transcendence. Because Baruch Hu says, Zelu Masar Selukim. I'll leave Nevuah in the world just so long as the alternative of destruction is there and you make a choice. You wanted me to take the Yeshivat Ohr Somayach out of the world? Okay, but then the positive side is not coming free. There's no such thing as getting something free. It has to be a choice. Immediately, they both left the world at the same time. This is the challenge of learning to make a contribution that is really constructive and positive rather than destructive. Are you powerful? Yes, you have the power to change. First of all, to build yourself. The Gaon of Vilna said, the purpose of being in this world is to be masak in your midos. And he said the ability to perfect one midah is as hard as learning the whole of Shas. That's a worthy project. If you make progress on that project, and Kodesh Baruch Hu finds you worthy, he may put you in a situation where you can also have hashpah on other people. If not, then you weren't meant to do that. Don't give in to the desire for the quick kill, the quick victory, the cheap victory. Even though it's coming from a healthy place, like the Chazon Ish said, it's coming from the desire to make a difference, desire to make a contribution. Yes, but you have to have chokhmah in what kind of contribution you want to make. There are those who live with us, who are part of us, who have a taste for destruction, for certain types of demonstrations, certain types of violence against others, for whom they feel differently. And that's something where we are being mushpa, affected by the society around us, and we have to try to be conscious of it, sensitive to it, and be misgaber. I want to end with something which I heard, we as a whole staff heard from Randall Weinbach, Seichus of the Bracha. He said, if you look in the Rambam and Hilchos Avodah Zorah, you see Avram Avinu's life, his career in Kiruv. And his career in Kiruv had two phases. He started out in Ur Kasdim. In Ur Kasdim, as you all know, from the Midrashim, and the Rambam quotes them, he came upon the idea of a Borei Olam. The Rambam says at the age of 48. Another text says 40. Kesef Mishnah talks about the Medrash of 3 and the times of development. The Rambam says that Avraham Avinu was makriv karbanos to Avodah Zorah with his own hands. The full realization came only when he was 48. On the way, when he was developing his ideas and his understanding, he challenged the people around him. He said, you believe in these statues, you believe in the stars, you believe it, but there are all sorts of difficulties. Your ideas don't make sense. And he, as you know, broke the statues, destroyed them, till finally he left Ur Kasdim. How many people went with Avraham Avinu to leave Ur Kasdim? 3 others. His father, his nephew, and his wife. 4 of them, and that's all. If you're talking about a cure of effort, that's a gigantic failure. He was there for decades, talking and arguing and disagreeing and demonstrating, suffering, being saved miraculously from near death, and it made no followers, none. Came to Haran. According to the Rambam, he changed his strategy. He talked to people calmly. He talked to each person in his own language. He spoke to them in a friendly manner, in a respectful manner. I'm putting in a little bit, but this is the time of the Rambam. He made thousands of followers, thousands. So I think maybe we should learn something from that. As I said before, righteous indignation is such a pleasure. It's so reinforcing of my Yetzer Hara. It's so reinforcing of my false self-image. I'm so great. I'm so good. I'm so wonderful. I'm so right. I'm so right. And they're so wrong. That's what he was in Ur Kasdim. That didn't affect anybody, not positively. But if you reach out to a person with respect, with care, with sensitivity, and with understanding, you can change worlds. You can change worlds. Everything that I've said this evening is simply tipa min hayam, what I learned from my Rabbi, was the Rabbi Zatzal. I'll leave you with one story of the way in which he touched people. A woman came to see him, not a religious Jew, and she created statues. She was a sculptress. They conversed for a while. Then the Rebbe Zatzal said to her, why don't you sculpt yourself? You're an artist. You're a creative person. Be self-creative. Use your creativity and your artistry to sculpt yourself. He found a way to speak to her in her language, like the Rambam says, that Avraham Avinu did. Use her gifts. When you say that to her, what you're saying to her is, you have a positive gift. You could use it for something higher than stone and metal. You could sculpt yourself. This is the way he had such a hashpah on hundreds and hundreds of our generation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should be mezaka us, that we should be aware of what's going on around us, that we should ask Esther Amalka's question, Mazeh v'al mazeh. We should try to carry out the Maharal's exercise. If we see this going on, number one, what is it made of? What are its sources? How does the Kodesh Baruch Hu look at it? She said Mazeh first and Al Mazeh second. And then ask ourselves, to what extent are we being affected by what we see, and try to correct those effects, learn from the events that take place, from their structure, from their character, what it is that we need to fix, irrespective of reading HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mind, why he sent it. He certainly sent it for that. He certainly sent it for us to meditate on and to find things that we can improve. And in the light of that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should mezaka us to save us from all the dangers that we're facing. We have to be endlessly thankful for the relief from COVID, and daven that there shouldn't be other diseases and other types of challenges and stresses that face us, so that we can serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the leiv shalom that we really all want to be able to accomplish.